They could kill Malcolm, they could jail Huey, they could assassinate Fred Hampton, but they couldn't stop Farrakhan, and that terrified them more than anything. Let me tell you about a man who white America has spent decades trying to destroy, trying to silence, trying to erase from history, and failed every single time. Minister Louis Farrakhan represents something that the power structure in this country cannot tolerate. A black man with an independent platform, an independent economic base, an independent vision for black liberation, and most importantly, the unwavering respect and attention of millions of black people who will listen to him regardless of what mainstream media says about him. The fear of Minister Farrakhan is not about the man himself. It's about what he represents. Black autonomy, black self-determination, black economic independence, and black consciousness that cannot be controlled, cannot be bought, and cannot be silenced. That's the nightmare scenario for white supremacy. Not a black leader who asks for permission, who seeks approval, who compromises for access, but a black leader who builds his own institutions, speaks his own truth, and maintains his own power base completely independent of their validation or their resources. Let's go back to 1995 because that's when Minister Farrakhan did something that shook this country to its core. He organized the Million Man March, and despite every attempt to minimize it, despite media blackouts, despite politicians refusing to acknowledge it, despite predictions that it would fail, 1 million black men showed up in Washington, D.C. 1 million. Let that sink in. 1 million black men answering the call of a leader that mainstream America had spent years demonizing, calling anti-Semitic, calling divisive, calling dangerous. 1 million black men said, "We don't care what they say about him. We know what he's done for us. We know what he represents. We're showing up." That march was more than a gathering. It was a demonstration of power. It was proof that Minister Farrakhan could mobilize Black America on a scale that politicians could only dream of. It was evidence that he had built something they couldn't touch: genuine grassroots support, genuine community trust, genuine leadership authority that didn't depend on media coverage or political endorsement. That march said to white America, "You don't control our narrative. You don't control our movements. You don't control who we follow." And that scared them to death. Because think about what the Million Man March represented strategically. It showed that black men could organize peacefully, massively, and independently. It showed that we didn't need their institutions to gather, to unify, to make our voices heard. It showed that Minister Farrakhan had more pull in black communities than most elected officials, than most mainstream civil rights organizations, than most media figures. It demonstrated raw political power that existed completely outside the traditional channels they're used to controlling. And what did they do in response? They tried to smear him harder. They amplified old controversies. They took quotes out of context. They called him hateful. They said he was divisive. They tried everything to delegitimize the march, to minimize its impact, to convince black folks that following Farrakhan was somehow wrong or dangerous. But here's what they didn't understand. The harder they attacked him, the more credibility he gained in our communities. Because we learned a long time ago that when white America is terrified of a black leader, that leader is probably doing something right. Let me talk about what Minister Farrakhan actually built, because this is crucial to understanding why they fear him so much. He took the Nation of Islam, an organization that had been struggling after the death of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and he rebuilt it into a pillar of Black America. He didn't do this with government grants. He didn't do this with corporate sponsorships. He didn't do this by compromising or seeking approval from mainstream institutions. He did it by speaking truth, by organizing communities, by building economic enterprises, by providing real solutions to real problems in Black neighborhoods. The Nation of Islam under Minister Farrakhan's leadership became known for going into the most dangerous communities and bringing order without police. They became known for rehabilitating men whose society had given up on, turning drug addicts into disciplined, productive citizens. They became known for building businesses, creating jobs, promoting Black economic self-sufficiency. They became known for teaching Black pride, Black history, Black excellence at a time when mainstream education was still trying to convince us we were inferior. This is what terrified white America, not the controversial statements that media obsesses over, but the actual work, the actual transformation of communities, the actual building of independent Black institutions that didn't need their permission or their funding, the actual creation of a model for Black self-determination that worked. Because if Black folks across America looked at what the Nation of Islam was doing and said, we can do that too, we don't need to beg them for anything, we can build our own, that would fundamentally disrupt the entire power structure. Minister Farrakhan understood something that many Black leaders either don't understand or are afraid to act on. White supremacy maintains control not primarily through violence anymore, though that's still part of it, but through dependence. They keep us dependent on their institutions, their approval, their resources, their validation. And any Black leader who teaches independence, who builds independent structures, who shows Black folks that we can provide for ourselves, organize ourselves, govern ourselves, that leader becomes a threat that must be neutralized. So they tried to cancel him before cancel culture was even a term. They banned him from mainstream media. They made it career suicide for mainstream figures to associate with him publicly. They pressured venues to refuse to host him. They had politicians denounce him. They created an entire infrastructure designed to isolate him, to make him radioactive, to ensure that even if Black folks respected him privately, they wouldn't support him publicly. But here's what they miscalculated. You can't cancel someone who never needed your platform in the first place. Minister Farrakhan built his platform through mosques, through community centers, through word of mouth, through cassette tapes, and then CDs, and then DVDs, and then YouTube. He built his platform through the trust he earned by actually serving communities that nobody else would serve. He built his platform through consistency, through saying the same thing in the hood that he said on stage, through living what he preached, through demonstrating integrity over decades. The mainstream cancellation didn't faze him because he understood something fundamental. His power didn't come from them. It came from us. And as long as he maintained that connection, as long as he kept serving Black communities, as long as he kept speaking truth regardless of consequences, they couldn't touch him. And you know what proved that beyond any doubt? 20 years after the first Million Man March, he did it again. The 20th anniversary Million Man March in 2015. Same location, same call for Black men to gather, to atone, to commit to building our communities. And once again, hundreds of thousands showed up. After 2 decades of media attacks, after 2 decades of being called every name imaginable, after 2 decades of attempts to destroy his credibility, Black folks still answered his call, still showed up, still demonstrated that his leadership mattered more to us than their opinion of him. That 2015 march was, in many ways, even more significant than the first one because it proved longevity. It proved that what Minister Farrakhan built wasn't a moment, but a movement. It proved that despite everything they threw at him, despite every attempt to erase him from relevance, he remained one of the most respected voices in Black America, and that respect exists for a reason. The respect exists because he never sold out. In an era where so many Black leaders have compromised, have softened their message for mainstream acceptance, have traded their principles for access, Minister Farrakhan stood firm. He said what he believed regardless of who it offended. He made demands that weren't polite or comfortable. He spoke truth about power structures that people didn't want exposed. He never apologized for being unapologetically pro-Black. He never pretended that our interests and white America's interests were the same. He never asked permission to speak or to organize or to lead. The respect exists because he provided solutions, not just critiques. It's easy to complain about problems. It's harder to build institutions that address those problems. Minister Farrakhan built. He created structures. He developed programs. He put his money where his mouth was. He showed Black folks that we could solve our own problems if we organized ourselves, disciplined ourselves, and committed to each other. The respect exists because he never abandoned the most marginalized among us. While mainstream leaders were chasing suburban voters and corporate donors, Minister Farrakhan was in the hood. He was talking to gang members. He was reaching addicts. He was organizing the forgotten. He was speaking to the people who mainstream society had written off, telling them they had value, they had purpose, they could transform their lives. And he backed that up with actual programs that helped people do exactly that. Now, Minister Farrakhan is in his 90s. He's not preaching in mosques every week like he used to. His public appearances are less frequent. His health has declined. And that's natural. That's the cycle of life. But here's what's beautiful. He doesn't have to speak anymore because he gave us the blueprint. He laid the foundation. He showed us the model. He demonstrated what independent Black leadership looks like, what independent Black institution building looks like, what uncompromising dedication to Black liberation looks like. The work now is on us. We have the blueprint. We have the example. We have decades of his teachings available at our fingertips. We have the model of the Million Man March showing us that we can organize ourselves on a massive scale. We have the example of the Nation of Islam showing us that we can build institutions that serve our communities. We have his entire body of work showing us that we don't need their approval to do what needs to be done. Minister Farrakhan should rest. He's earned it. He's given his life to this struggle. He's endured attacks that would have broken lesser men. He's built something that will outlast him. He's inspired generations. He deserves to enjoy his elder years knowing that he fulfilled his mission, that he never compromised, that he remained true to his principles and his people until the end. But his rest doesn't mean our work is done. If anything, it means our work is just beginning. We need to make him proud. We need to take what he taught us and apply it. We need to build on the foundation he laid. We need to organize our communities the way he showed us. We need to develop economic independence the way he preached. We need to maintain the dignity and discipline he modeled. We need to speak truth to power the way he did, regardless of consequences. Making Minister Farrakhan proud means actually following what he told us to do, not just praising him, but implementing his vision. It means building Black-owned businesses and supporting them. It means organizing our neighborhoods and taking responsibility for our communities. It means educating our children about their true history and their true potential. It means developing the discipline and structure he always emphasized. It means working together, supporting each other, choosing collective liberation over individual advancement. It means understanding why they feared him and making sure they have reason to fear us too. Not fear of violence, but fear of what we can accomplish when we're organized, when we're unified, when we're economically independent, when we're politically sophisticated, when we refuse to accept anything less than full liberation and reparations for our ancestors' suffering and our ongoing oppression. White America feared Minister Farrakhan because he represented a version of Black leadership they couldn't control. He was the leader they couldn't buy, couldn't intimidate, couldn't silence, couldn't eliminate. He survived every attack, emerged from every controversy, maintained his platform through every attempt to destroy it. He proved that Black leaders don't need white approval to be effective. He proved that speaking truth is more powerful than seeking acceptance. He proved that building independent institutions is more valuable than begging for inclusion in theirs. They feared him because he was effective, because he actually moved people, because he actually built things, because he actually changed lives and transformed communities, because he showed millions of Black people that another way was possible, that we didn't have to accept the scraps they offered us, that we could demand and build something better for ourselves. They feared him because even at 90+ years old, after decades of attacks, after being banned from mainstream platforms, he still commands more respect in Black communities than most elected officials ever will. They feared him because the Million Man March proved that he could mobilize us on a scale that threatens their entire system of control. They feared him because everything he built without their permission or their resources, proving that we don't need them the way they need us to believe we do. So as Minister Farrakhan rests, as he enjoys his elder years, as he watches the seeds he planted continue to grow, our job is simple. Prove that his work wasn't in vain. Prove that his sacrifices mattered. Prove that his teachings took root. Prove that we learned the lessons. Prove that we can continue the work without him having to carry the burden anymore. Prove that Black liberation is inevitable because he raised a generation that understands what he taught, that implements what he modeled, that refuses to accept anything less than what we deserve. That's how we honor him. That's how we make him proud. That's how we ensure that everything they feared about him becomes everything they fear about us.